Welcome to another edition of Inside Town Hall. I'm Jim Cameron, your host and the program director of Darien TV 79. And you, as a faithful viewer, knows that Inside Town Hall is where we talk to folks that help run town government. And we're actually not inside Town Hall today, but we're pretty close. We're inside the police headquarters of the Darien Police Department, and our guest today is Jeremiah Marron. Do you go by Jerry or prefer Jeremiah?
Most people know me as Jerry, but I'm happy to
Okay.
answer to both.
Jerry sounds great. He is the chief of police of the Darien Police Department, and been there for how long now? Have you been in that particular job?
I'm new to this role. I've been here since April of 2024 as chief, but not new to the police department. I'm in my just about finishing my 29th year.
And you had a father who was a captain in the police department too, did
Yeah,
you not?
that's what got me into the business. Yeah, my father was a police officer here beginning in 1966. Rose to the rank of captain before he took a chief's position upstate, where he worked another 13 years as the chief of police.
So, did you decide early before you went to school that you wanted to be a police officer? And if so, what kind of courses did you take?
I didn't decide early. Neither my parents wanted me to be a police officer or my brother to be a police officer. And I kind of figured it out through high school. I was leaning in that direction more and more. I had some friends, and when we went into college, we started, taking some courses that dealt with criminal justice and constitutional law. And it's a noble job now, in my opinion. It was a noble job then, and we were excited to, as 21 years old, taking tests for police departments, and ironically, got picked up by the Darien Police Department when I was in processes for a few other agencies as well, and I've been here ever since.
So you had to take a test. What's
Yeah,
the recruiting process if somebody wants to join the Darien Police Department?
it's a little different now. Back when I took it, it was a written test at the cafeteria at the old Darien High School, and I believe they ended up hiring 3 positions off of that test list, and over 500 people took it. Not as many people take that test today. We hire and outsource our testing, as do most police agencies in Connecticut. We use an outfit called Police App, where they do some of the vetting for us to begin. They'll do the physical fitness testing and the written testing, and provided a candidate reaches a certain score and passes properly, then we consider them for further testing and then ultimately, hopefully, employment.
So when we have an opening on the Darien Police
Mhm.
Department, what kind of applicants do you get? Are they from other departments? Are they novices that want to get into the business?
A little bit of both. The Darien Police Department currently, our sworn staff is comprised of 38% of officers that were officers somewhere else already. They've come from other municipalities in Connecticut, both large and small, anywhere from Bridgeport, New Haven, Norwalk, Stratford, Monroe, Trumbull. And then we have current staff members that were former NYPD, Burlington, Vermont, Westchester County agencies. So it's a little of both, but we're fortunate here in Darien to hire the absolute best candidate when we have an opening. So if that best candidate is a lateral officer, or we see potential in somebody new, the last couple we've hired have been candidates that were not police officers ahead of time when we sent them off to the police academy.
And how do we know that people that are coming from other departments aren't being shoveled away for malfeasance in those
Mhm.
departments? And how do you kind of check out the background and credentials of a candidate?
That's a good question. In our line of work, it's pretty self-explanatory how we don't let that happen. But to a typical civilian, they may not know how in-depth we go into their background. We consider their career, how long they've been somewhere, any internal investigations they might have been a part of, their general performance, evaluations of supervisors, all the way down to like what their neighbors think of them and what their family members and former employers and their college transcripts, all that type of stuff is considered. And they're still required to submit to a polygraph test, pass the polygraph test, also a psychological examination and medical testing as well.
And why does Darien seem to be such an attractive place for candidates? Why do they want to work here as opposed to another department where they might
Mm.
get let's say, a little more action?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because when I first started here, and I had good friends in both the Stanford and the Norwalk Police Department, and we're hearing about some of the stuff that they were involved in. And I thought about switching myself about 2 years in because it was a little light on crime here in Darien, as you know. But my friends convinced me, they're like, in 10 years, you're going to want to be back in Darien. You're not going to be want to chasing drug dealers and doing some of the heavy lifting. So I had some early success with my career. It got me really involved and invested here in Darien, and that's the story. But to answer your initial question, I think the most recent example I could give you is we hired a candidate who was choosing between the Darien Police Department and another Fairfield County agency. And what really kind of made the decision for this officer was that we still had a pension as part of our benefit package. And also our salary was over $10,000 more than what the other agency was offering, starting salary. So between our benefits package, um, it's pretty easy to tell people that are considering working here how well supported we are by the community. The town is run very well, and we're adequately funded. We get the equipment we need to efficiently kind of conduct our jobs, perform our jobs, and that's a great selling point for any new prospective candidate officer.
So, in a way, I guess you don't want a candidate who's looking for action, who wants to chase bad guys and do shootouts on I-95. That's not what you want, right?
No, I mean the couple of decades that I've been here, the job itself and the industry itself has just changed drastically. There's a lot more that goes into being a police officer right from day one. Just with the way you're interacting with the community versus it really was 20, 30 years ago versus the technology that you're involved in using. So we look for somebody who wears several different hats and consider that when we're making the final decision to hire somebody, someone who wants to get involved in specialized units, maybe like the Marine Division we just briefly spoke of, and we can talk more about that. And it draws a lot. A lot of our new officers are interested in getting involved in the K-9 programs and the SWAT team or regional SWAT team, and like I said, the Marine Division or maybe the motorcycle unit.
And what is the starting pay for officers?
That's it changes based on the union contract. I don't know if I have that perfectly handy, but the starting pay, I believe, is right around 100,000.
100,000.
Yeah,
And
pretty
do you have
close.
to be a college graduate?
You need some college experience currently for new hires that are not previous police officers. We require 60 credits or military experience. Um, you can't have any felony convictions. You can't have any class A or B misdemeanor convictions. You can't be convicted of any domestic violence incidents. So there are some rules that are going to be disqualifiers if you fall in those categories. But you have to be 21 years of age, and we're just looking for someone who really is going to be an inspiration to what we do here and really want to be here and be a good team member.
Hmm. Inside Town Hall is the show, and our guest today on the program is our Chief of Police, Jerry Marron. It's not actually you that does the hiring of new officers; it's the police commission.
Correct.
How does that work? What is the police commission? One of my favorite shows on TV 79, by the way.
Yeah, and thank you for covering all those meetings that we have. The Police Commission is our civilian oversight board. It's a three-member commission that basically, besides really supporting what we try and do here as far as public safety here in Darien, they're involved in initiatives that we look to start up. They give final approval on a lot of things that we're looking to improve upon and procedurally and operationally. But the main, like you hit it right on the head, the main responsibility that they really have is personnel and staffing and the hiring and in some cases firing and terminating of existing employees. But we're all on the same page when it comes to who we want here, and we're clearly, as I mentioned, we're looking for the best candidate, and I believe the police commission does a great job in sifting through some of the potential people that want to work here, and we get the right person just about every time.
But they set policy for the department?
They're definitely involved in that conversation. Our policies don't change too much unless we get involved in something that is mandated from the state or by law or by legislation. We see how that kind of works for the Darien Police Department and how it may change us operationally, and they would give final approval of any change like that.
Hmm. So you mentioned that TV 79 does cover the police commission meetings,
Mhm.
and that's something that we initiated, oh, I don't know how many years ago, a few years back. But I'm wondering if that has any way changed the way the police commission operates. Has it increased public engagement? Do more people show up to speak to the police commission than might have in the past?
I think it's really helped with our transparency for
Yeah.
sure. Um, there's plenty of times where people have a complaint about speeding on their road or a traffic condition or changing some signage in their neighborhood or a variety of different factors, want to have speed bumps on their road. And you know, first we'll send our traffic agent or traffic officer out there to kind of have a meeting with the person who's has any questions. But ultimately, if it is something, as the legal traffic authority for the town of Darien, the police commission will ask the resident to come and appear in public session at our meetings, and they'll address the concerns and issues there. And they gain a little bit of more understanding of what it takes to have things approved and get things put in place here in Darien from a legal traffic authority perspective. So I think it's helped with our transparency, definitely. So I thank you for that.
And you also are doing, not you individually, but maybe you, I don't know, someone on the department's doing more social media posts.
Mhm.
You're being more aggressive in issuing news releases. Uh, and you personally had been expressing some frustration recently with the social media rumor mill.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to us a little bit about that and why that concerns you.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's no secret that social media is a great tool for us in interacting with, different pockets of people in town and on different levels. I used to do a lot of the social media, and I've kind of turned the reins over to some younger, more energetic, more creative officers, and I think they've been doing a really good job in the last year. I thank them for that too. But we do use it as a vehicle to get information out. Sometimes, as you know, in town here, the speed at which information travels is just incredible. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I'm hearing rumors on social media before our officers have even arrived at the incident. And that can be problematic for us. We've had some recent incidents and inaccuracies kind of became really widespread. And it just took some quick fixing and correction and getting the proper information out there. As you know, some people get their information from different sources. A lot of people get it from the moms of Facebook groups, for example, or from our social media platforms, and some people just get it still from the Darien Times or local TV networks. So when we can, we like to try and set the record straight, and we encourage people to not spread information until they absolutely know it's accurate and true and credible. And most of the time, when it's dealing with the police, they should get their information from the police or what we're putting out, and not fill in the blanks if we haven't put stuff out yet or information out about certain things.
In my many years as a media consultant, I used to tell clients that news is a vacuum and nature abhors a vacuum. If you don't fill that vacuum with
Mhm.
your facts, it will be filled by other people's opinions and rumors,
Absolutely.
etc. So I remember the days when this town used to have two newspapers,
Yeah.
and they used to print the police blotter every week. And the police blotter still exists, but I don't see it published as such. I see the local patch and Darienite, etc.,
Mhm.
kind of cherry picking stories and making them look like actual news items when they're really generated by the police department. And uh, does that police blotter or the press releases you put out each week, do you find those useful? Do you find people giving you feedback on them? Why do you do that?
Well, and I remember the two newspapers as well. And probably back in those days, the administrative services captain would sit down once a week with reporters face to face and go over everything that happened in the town, whether it was important or newsworthy or or just something that we felt was important to get out. It changed over years. It's changed probably 15 years ago, where we've just decided to create our own kind of summaries of what we felt that everybody wants to know about. And some of the things are required by law for us to push out. And we found that the best way to handle that at this stage is to have someone who's acting as a public information officer craft that document, send it out to our media contacts at least once a week. We try and do it on Tuesdays, but sometimes, especially like this week, we had a lot of sickness running around in the department and a lot of staff was out, so it was a little delayed. But we have a media group, and most of those are some of the online platforms, the Patches and the Hamlet Hubs and the Daily Voices, but we have good contact with them. We have good relationships with them. And as you mentioned, they won't put our whole document out. They won't talk about everything. They just handpick what they feel is important. And we're all right with that. And, we do have a relationship that's good enough that if we feel like, hey, we really want you to assist us with this particular incident. If we're looking for a person of interest or a vehicle of interest, could you make sure you highlight that? And we get good feedback and we get good response with that type of thing. But we also, again, back to the information traveling as fast as it does these days, we recognize the need for people to know what's actually happening. So if we have something that's a little more sensational than the regular weekly news release we put out, we'll do a standalone news release on some of the bigger incidents, and that often is followed up by these media contacts reaching back out to us with more questions, and on occasion we can provide more information, but most of what we release, that's about what we can release about that particular incident at that time.
Mm-hmm. And the news release you put out each week contains mugshots.
Yeah.
Why is that?
By law, we have to release all arrest information. And what we have found is if we just send a paragraph of a narrative about what happened in an incident without a photo, which we are obligated to release, our media contacts would subsequently reach out and say, hey, can we get a mugshot? And in that case, we have to send it out anyway. And it's just it becomes a little redundant. It becomes twice the effort. So when we have arrests, by our policy, we're including the mugshots in most cases.
And what about with surveillance video from a place? Like I'm thinking of the David Harvey jewelry daytime. Was that that wasn't that was an overnight break-in, wasn't it?
They've had daytime as well, though, not
Yeah.
in a recent past, but that's a case-by-case basis for us. We don't want anything to jeopardize an investigation. If we're looking for a car or a person, we don't want that car or person to go in hiding. If there's a chance that we could use maybe networking with other agencies or other tactics or other investigatory tools. So it depends on the circumstance and the incident itself, whether we want to release video, mugs or pictures of people ahead of time. If it can better our investigation or keep somebody safe, of course, we're going to do that. But we don't want to lose an opportunity at something if we prematurely release some of that footage.
Jerry Marron is the chief of the Darien Police Department. He's our guest today on Inside Town Hall. One of the pieces of technology which I know that the department has embraced are license plate readers.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had a chance to do a ride along with one of the officers when you were testing this equipment out for the first time. What is a license plate reader and how do you use them?
We use them in a couple of different ways, but to answer the first part of your question, a license plate reader, in essence, is a camera that is software based, and it takes a flash picture of the rear license plate of a vehicle. Now, we have license plate readers in our marked patrol cars that also take pictures of the front license plates if there's a front license plate. But if there's anything attached to that license plate, like maybe the operator was associated with a missing person or a wanted suspect, or the car is simply unregistered or uninsured, or the registration suspended, it'll let that officer know that there's something going on with that plate. And after a little further looking into it, and they can confirm that, yeah, in fact, that's the plate that belongs on that vehicle, and there's there's an issue, whether it's a violation or a safety concern, then they can further investigate that. So it's become a technology now in law enforcement that really is used in almost every single one of our investigations. One of the first things our detectives do is not only pull from data collected by our own license plate readers, but data that's collected from other towns and in some cases other states. Kind of goes, the information is pooled together. And as recent as this week, I know the Norwalk Police Department was using data from what we've collected and vice versa. So it's used in all sorts of investigations. To be honest with you, when we had our first camera installed in this past year, it picked up information that involved a homicide out of Canada. And they were able to make an arrest based on the information that our camera had collected. So we're seeing a lot of assistance with our investigations. It's hard to measure if we're preventing any crime, but in a circumstance where a stolen car hit on one of our cameras and we went to the area and maybe prevented further crime, that I could speak to. But as far as a deterrent from fully preventing crime or reducing crime, that's a difficult thing to measure, but it's been a great tool for us to date. And we have more cameras coming that are going to be located strategically throughout town, some of our ingress and egress points that really will capture a lot of data and hope to assist us in some serious crimes.
So they're going to be permanently mounted someplace, not just on the cars themselves.
Correct. Now our
So they'll
dash
be
cam,
keeping a record of every car that almost every car that comes in or out of town. Is that right?
the only data we're really looking at is the license plates that are in violation of something, are involved in other crimes. If you or I are driving by it, yeah, it'll capture the license plate and that'll go into a data pool for 30 days, but then it's purged after that.
But if I'm involved with, let's say this is not true, but a divorce settlement with my wife, and she's accusing me of
Mhm.
driving up to the casinos to gamble. Her attorney can't necessarily go to you and say, "I want a record of every time
Correct.
Jim's license plate was picked up,"
Correct.
right?
Correct.
This is protected, privileged information.
Yep.
What about ghost plates? We're hearing a lot about people in New York City, especially since the tolls went up and congestion pricing
Mhm.
began. They're covering up their license plate or they're doing something to obscure it so that automated technology can't read the plates. Are the license plate readers capable of identifying that, or what do they do?
If the plates are really obscured, no, it's not going to pick up that data. But what we're hoping there is that the law can really assist there. People can't obscure their plates in the state of Connecticut. So
They
our office
can?
cannot.
Oh, they cannot. Okay.
You could put a protective cover over the license plate, but it needs to be fully transparent. So
Right.
I'm sure there's incidents where people are covering up their plates, and that's really the only thing we see, as opposed to a ghost plate type situation. We're not seeing a lot of that, but people do cover their plates thinking that maybe it's going to assist them or prevent them from having to pay tolls and seeing or having their plate visible enough that it prevents them from, I don't know what you may want to cover your plate for, other than if you're going to be committing a crime or trying to get out of something. But our officers are instructed that if there's a plate that is obscured, you're going to get pulled over and the proper enforcement action is going to be taken. But it can affect the capturing of the data from the license plate readers. Exactly right.
Mhm. One of your and the department's continuing sources of frustration for many years now is cars that are entered, not broken into, but entered because the car was left unlocked in a driveway, sometimes even with the keys inside or with a wallet or a Walkman or whatever else would be there attractive to people. Um, your predecessors as chief have expressed a lot of frustration over this.
Yeah.
It sounds like, this is not getting any better. Talk to us about why this is not a good thing, not only for the victims of their own negligence, but also for the rest of us.
Well, I mean, it's been my entire career, and my previous boss, Chief Don Anderson, who's now retired. Before he left, he was going through some of the archives where there was a handwritten blotter entries from the 50s down in our basement, and they were talking about it in the 50s, how people were getting their cars stolen because they were leaving them unlocked with the keys in the ignition or nearby. And that continues today. And if I'm probably wrong in saying this, but at least 24 different perspectives and enforcement type uh, initiatives we've had have occasionally made impact, but I think it's just the culture of a town like Darien. It is a safe town. With the advent of the fobs and proximity fobs for keys to start cars, it's just made it more convenient for people to leave the fob in the car to begin with. But we I can't implore residents enough that it's not just losing your car. It's a lot more than that. It's inviting crime to town. It's having our officers involved in chases. It's getting people hurt. It's having your car used and other crimes across the state or in other states. We've had stolen cars from Darien used in homicides, narcotics transactions, robberies, car pursuits, you name it. We recover these cars with bullet holes in them. They're used in any type of crime you can think. And I've even had firsthand knowledge of a suspect under arrest who says, no, everybody knows that Darien people will leave their cars unlocked with the keys in it. That's why we're here. We're here to take your cars. That's basically the gist of what this individual is telling us. So some people are new to town. They don't realize that it's been a problem for decades. And when we have the opportunities, whether it's on TV 79 during our police commission meetings or through our news releases or through our social media posts, we try and remind people and just really explain that the problem is it's a lot more in depth than you just leaving your keys in your car or forgetting. I myself had someone try and steal my police car out of the driveway during an overnight back in May of 2020. Thankfully, my car was locked and the individual went to the next driveway. We're not saying that lock your car so your neighbors does get stolen. We're saying as a community, kind of as a proactive effort, just to change the culture and lock your cars. Don't keep valuables visible in the car. Park at night in the garage if you can, and just have responsibility for your own property.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you mentioned it at one of the police commission meetings that there was somebody who had had their same car stolen 4 times.
That's correct. Not an exaggeration.
So the car was stolen because it was left unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
It got stolen again because they left it unlocked again.
Yeah, and this is over the course of a few years, but
Well,
yeah,
but
same
even
car,
still,
same circumstance, same residence. Yep.
and no penalty to that person. Their insurance didn't go up. Nothing happened to them.
You would, I don't know that for to be fact, but there's no law that I know of anywhere in the country that really places the victim kind of at fault when it comes to car theft. There could be different insurance companies that treat it in a way where you're going to get dropped by your insurance company, but there's none here in Connecticut that I know that there's any serious implications of your car, of what happens when your car gets stolen because you left your keys in it or in the car unlocked. It's just, you would think that there is by now, but there's none that I know of currently.
Jerry Marron is the chief of the Darien Police Department. He's joining us today on Inside Town Hall. Why not publish the names or the addresses of these people who are the victims of their own negligence?
Well, it's been thought about over the years, and it's just by our policy. We've chosen not to re-victimize these people. We don't know that that's going to really fix the problem that we've had here for, I don't know, over 50 years. But we've chosen to, really kind of increase the awareness through our social media posts and just at least get the information out there that it is happening. I am happy to say, when I was quickly looking at some stats before our meeting here today, I did notice that over the third quarter of 2024, both car thefts and car burglaries were down. There could be a couple of reasons there. It could be maybe we are starting to change people's minds about being more responsible with their cars. Maybe our detectives are doing good follow-up work and making some arrests. And Maybe we're out there stopping enough cars and being enough of a deterrent to have them go to the next town or go somewhere else or just not do it again, do it at all. But we do still pick up some overnight car thefts and some overnight car burglaries. And what the frustrating part, as you mentioned to me, is all the man hours we put into investigating these incidents. It's really not a great use of your police department when they come into work at 7 o'clock in the morning and in the first couple of hours are just taking reports of stolen cars or cars that were entered during the overnight, and then they spend the remainder of their shift writing the reports. It's really, I don't think it's what anybody wants their police officers doing.
Some of the people that were involved in these thefts were minors,
Yeah,
and I believe the legislature changed the law or something. They were getting arrested and released the same day, and
yeah,
they one of them actually said to you, "I'll see you tomorrow night."
that's correct. That was actually the individual who tried to break into my police car during the overnight. He was
Was that a
arrested.
marked police car
No,
with?
it was an unmarked police
Oh,
car.
okay.
My personal vehicle and my police car were parked side by side, but it was locked. Fortunately, that individual did end up stealing a car that night in a nearby town and was arrested later in the week. And he told the officers of that agency, same time tonight, guys. And I believe as a 17-year-old at the time, he had been arrested over 20 times already. So
And
you're right.
is that changed now?
No, it hasn't. The legislation, they try and change it in each session to kind of make the laws a little bit more firm, but the rules that regulate what the courts and what police officers can do with minors it's very soft in my opinion, and I think it's contributing to the problems that we're seeing. Most of these car thefts, most of these overnight car entries are perpetrated by minors. A lot of them from out of town, some of the bigger cities, and that's where we're finding our cars recovered. And in the Waterburys, the Hartfords, the New Havens, and Bridgeport on occasion. So I really am a firm believer that if our legislators can maybe tighten up on what happens to juveniles, maybe after the fifth or sixth time, maybe we'll see less of it, and maybe our communities and roadways will be a little safer.
What about the theft of catalytic converters? That was a big concern a year or so back. Has that
Yeah,
got any better?
it has. It really depends on the price of precious metals. And as that fluctuates, we see the wave of catalytic converter thefts fluctuate. So currently, I don't think we've had any for a few months. I know we've made arrests over the past year or two for those crimes. So, there's certain things that people can do to protect themselves against that kind of a theft. They typically target certain vehicles that provide easier access to the catalytic converters, and that can be stolen from the bottom of your car in less than a minute. So we ask people to, park in a garage when you can, park in well-lit areas, park in highly visible areas. There's even a way to etch serial numbers and VIN numbers or some type of a owner-applied marking to the catalytic converter so that when it does get turned into a pawn shop or a scrapyard, they'll see that it doesn't belong to this person. And hopefully that's a deterrent enough not to pay off any money for a stolen item and maybe deter the whole crime to begin with. But again, to answer your question, we've had it recently, not in the last few months, but it does depend upon the price of precious metals at the time.
What should somebody do if they think a crime is being perpetrated? Let's say it's the middle of the night and they
Mhm.
hear somebody in their driveway, or they see their motion detector lights go off. I guess you don't want them running outside and challenging these
That's
people.
correct.
Why
That's
is that?
correct. Well, it's a safety issue. We don't want anybody getting hurt. Um, but I'm glad you brought that up because I always said that the safest thing for someone to do in that circumstance is to call 911. We'd rather receive a 911 call and realize it wasn't an emergency than not have it promptly reported to us and completely take us out of the equation. As an example, we had a resident one night went out, confronted a suspicious vehicle, wrote down the license plate, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, emailed the chief of police the license plate and said, "This car was parked in front of my house. I thought it was suspicious." Well, turns out when the chief came into work that morning, provided the license plate to the patrol division, it turned out it was a stolen car and had committed crimes in that neighborhood. If that individual had just called 911, we would at least had a better chance and potentially make an arrest or preventing those crimes. Anything of a routine matter or just a general question, feel free to call our routine number. Those officers and dispatchers that are working our communication center are happy to help.
Let's talk about something else involving motor vehicles, but not of a criminal nature. A while back, you had a crackdown on moving violations.
Mhm.
I believe using a grant from the Department of Transportation. And was that successful? I believe you did more traffic stops.
Mhm.
Why aren't there more traffic stops? Why do I see people running red lights or not stopping at stop signs with impunity, which kind of tells me, well, I guess I can get away with that. This is Darien. I don't have to stop at a stop sign. Well,
Well, a couple of questions there. To answer the first part, we did participate in a state-funded grant. It was the first time we had a grant of this nature available to us. It was headed by our traffic division, and what it allowed us to do was spend a certain amount of money on hiring officers back in an overtime capacity, specifically for traffic enforcement. The way we're structured here and the size of the department doesn't allow us to have our whole shift out there doing traffic enforcement and disregarding other calls for service. As an example, I think Captain Hidema last night wrote that we had 744 calls for service over the past 3 weeks, but then 80 traffic stops. Now, those two numbers are proportionate to each other. If our calls for service are down, our traffic enforcement is going to be up. So our officers are first responders. We handle emergency calls of ambulance calls, and property crime. So it's not that we have officers out that are just dedicated out there to do traffic enforcement. We do have a traffic division. That's Officer Tim Budd. You'll see him ride the motorcycle, and he's got a couple other vehicles at his disposal to do traffic enforcement specifically. He's one man, and our other officers are charged with doing traffic enforcement. And when they're quiet and they're not working on a report or responding to calls, that's part of what they need to be doing. Now, to answer your other part of your question, you're right. I believe that the culture of driving has just changed. Not here in Darien. You see what it's like on the highways. You see it in other parts of the country. I think now it gets back to what happens when a person does get caught for going through a stop sign or a red light. They're not worried about it anymore. They're not worried about their license getting suspended, really. It's the courts, I think, have not placed as much importance on what happens when you get a traffic ticket as there once was. And I think that's contributed to why we see a lot of what we see. If our officers are out there and they see someone go a red light, they're instructed to pull them over and give them a ticket or give them the proper enforcement. But I see it every day driving an unmarked police car, right? And I know our residents see it as well. But we do, when I look back on the data, specifically again, the third quarter of 2024, our traffic stops were up 154%. I had never seen that many traffic stops by the Darien Police Department in my entire career. So we do place importance on it. It may not be fully visible to every resident on every day, but I can assure you that our officers are making traffic stops every day on every shift.
Jerry Marron is the chief of police for the beautiful town of Darien, and he's joining us today on Inside Town Hall. Let's talk about something a little more cheerful. You mentioned the Marine Squadron.
Yes.
The Darien Police Department has a police boat and officers that are in the water. Is this a summertime activity? Is this year round? Why do we have a police boat?
Well, our boating community is one of the biggest in the area. And we've had a Marine division back to when my father and uncle were here. So it's a beautiful town. Our coastline's amazing, and it just has a lot of boating activity that sometimes needs enforcement taken. It needs guidance. We're out there as certified EMTs. We're out there to assist boaters. We're out there to provide awareness. In fact, we spoke at the police commission meeting last night that Officer Errett, who heads our Marine Division, he met with the Darien Sail and Power Squadron and gave a presentation on safety and a little bit of what we do. But I have to mention too that we have a lot of support from organizations in town with our Marine Division. We've gotten a lot of funding from the Darien Foundation. They've provided electronic equipment. Our officers out on the water have amazing capabilities to find people that might be lost in the middle of the night. We have a lot of kayaks out there in the warmer months. Sometimes you'll have someone overturning a kayak or a canoe and they can't get back in, and another boater will call for assistance, and they're pretty active. They really are. We work well with other agencies nearby who have maybe a little bit more complex and significant size marine divisions, but they work well together out there. I never really had a chance to work that division myself full time. I was more of the scuba side of things. We have a scuba team as well. And some of those officers are kind of cross-trained in both disciplines, both the running the boat there and working and operating some of the equipment on the boat. And then they're also divers as well.
And is the police boat out 12 months out of the year, or they come in the winter?
Not staffed 12 months a year. It's in the water 12 months a year. We're required by Homeland Security since 9/11 to have, if you have a Marine division, it needs to be in the water for the year, but we staff it during the summer months.
But you could get that boat out on the water if something happened.
Absolutely.
Pretty fast, right?
And we do have those incidents during the off season. There's still the local fishermen that are out there, and there's other vessels that are coming through, and they run into complications and often need our assistance. So that would normally require someone who has the Marine Division knowledge that may be driving around in a police car that day. They'll respond down to the boat and go handle the emergency. One of the things that potential new officers always bring up is the potential for working on a Marine division. A lot of these individuals have Marine experience or they have their boat license, let's say, but they come in from a police department that doesn't have a Marine division. It's more of a landlocked agency. So that comes up a lot in our entry-level interviews.
Speaking of driving or boating under the influence, the marijuana laws in this state have changed. What does the law say in terms of police pulling somebody over because they see them smoking a joint in the car, or they smell marijuana in the car? And how do you do a sobriety check on somebody who may have been smoking pot as opposed to drinking alcohol?
You're gonna think I'm misinterpreting the law here because it's so unusual, but recent changes in laws regarding marijuana use while operating a vehicle. The best analogy I can give you is it legal to smoke marijuana or ingest marijuana or THC while you're operating a vehicle? No, it is not. If a police officer sees you ingesting or smoking marijuana or THC while you're driving, can a police officer pull you over? No, they cannot. So there's a huge conflict there, and that's the way the current legislation stands. We're trying to get that sorted out. I think personally it's led to less safe roadways, but we see it pretty often. I'm sure everybody has had an opportunity now to be driving behind a car where an operator or an occupant is smoking marijuana and you can smell it coming through your own ventilation systems. It's not appropriate. I'm not really sure what kind of the thought process was and etching a law like that in stone, but we are seeing some complications. As far as testing for sobriety, you really would need a drug recognition expert, which we do not have here in Darien. However, we have a list of on-duty and active neighboring agencies that have drug recognition experts. And if we have someone stopped or was involved in an accident, believe they're under influence of drug or marijuana or THC, we will always call those neighboring agencies and have those officers come over and do the testing. The other way is that's a little tricky. If someone has their blood drawn through because they've been injured and they're in an accident and they were the operator of a vehicle and they're at the hospital now, we can file a search warrant for their blood records and see if there was a presence of THC in their bloodstream. But the question there is, how much does need to be in your blood system to constitute being under the influence of it? So there's question there too. But yeah, it's tricky. It's very frustrating for our officers, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Before we let you go, we wanted to talk a little bit about a new means of transportation, and that's these electric scooters that you see. Kids, they're like skateboards with handles, and they're silent and they're zooming around through town. Are they legal? Do they have to wear a helmet? Are they allowed to drive on the street? Should they be on the sidewalk? What's the law say?
Well, there's been a lot of concern lately, and there's several different town stakeholders that have kind of brought it up, and we've thought that the best way to kind of communicate what is accurate, what's proper, what safety concerns are out there was to start a campaign and just kind of pushing out awareness of what the laws are, what the different classifications of the e-bikes are. So we've recently come up with this pamphlet, and it's on our website as well. It's a kind of a trifold. It dictates and summarizes some of the basics of the law, who can drive them, who can drive which class of an e-bike, if you have to wear a helmet, which is you do have to wear a helmet. And the biggest thing, what the operators of these e-bikes and e-scooters need to know is you need to follow the rules of the road like a vehicle, like a bicycle. Like if you need to stop at stop signs, you need to be stopping at red lights. You can't be riding on sidewalks. So that's a common misconception. And part of what we're trying to do with this campaign is make the parents know. As you know, here in Darien, if there's a gadget or something that's flashy or expensive, kids are going to have it here. So we know that some of these bikes can really have capabilities beyond what the factory and manufacturer standards design them for, and they get tweaked and modified, and they're going faster than the 28 miles an hour that they should be. So we encourage parents to be aware that can happen and to be monitoring it. And it's not a safe situation for someone to be riding on a bike, an e-bike, an e-scooter with a plastic helmet that's going over 28 miles an hour. It's not set up for it. There's not enough protection there. It's not safe for the operator. So
Show us the cover of that brochure again, if you would, Chief. And that's available where?
so far, it's obviously here at the police department. By the end of next week, we should have some at the Darien Library, and I know Park and Rec has some at Town Hall right now.
Great.
And
So
you can
parents, you
also,
can pick one of those things up, right? It's on the
correct,
website too.
it's on the website as well. Yep.
Great. Well, I want to let you get back to doing the police work you're supposed to be doing. Uh, this is just a small part of your responsibilities, not as important as catching bad guys. But is there anything you want to add? Anything you'd like to say to the Darien community before we wrap this up?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and speak to the community. But I'd just like to thank the community for their support. They're really in favor of what we're doing here for the most part, especially after the holiday season. It's humbling to see everybody that dropped off cookies or sent dinners in to the guys and girls, and we really feel like the support for law enforcement locally and on a national level is really kind of swinging back. And I always thought it should swing back, and we just really appreciate the support of the town of Darien.
Well, we appreciate all of your service over these many years, following in your father's footsteps. Jerry Marron, who is the chief of the Darien Police Department, thank you very much for being with us on the program today.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, our faithful viewers. You've watched, yeah, another edition of Inside Town Hall.